When I opened the cherrywood jewelry box that morning, the air in the room felt different, too still, too quiet. It was supposed to be a quiet ritual, one I'd kept every year since Margaret passed. I'd sit by the window, sunlight spilling across the quilt she sewed in her last spring, and hold her wedding ring between my palms. Somehow, it still carried her warmth, or maybe I just like to think it did. But that morning, on her birthday, the box was empty. The velvet lining, once indented with the shape of the gold band, looked hollow, like an accusation. My hands trembled. I checked the lid, the corners, the drawers around it. Nothing. Only air and the faint scent of lavender soap that lingered on her things. Downstairs, voices rose over the sound of frying bacon and a blaring TV. "Turn the volume down, Dylan," my daughter shouted. Her teenage son mumbled something I couldn't make out, and a sports announcer continued screaming about a touchdown. I stood there, staring at the empty space where the ring should have been, my reflection trembling in the mirror. Margaret's ring was the last piece of her I had left. Her clothes had gone to donation. Her old novels to the library. Even her garden, once overflowing with lilies, had been trampled under the feet of my daughter's family when they moved in temporarily. 2 years later, they were still here. I took a deep breath, placed the box gently on the dresser, and went downstairs. Rachel was at the counter, flipping pancakes like she owned the kitchen. Her husband, Connor, sat at the table in his undershirt, scrolling through his phone, coffee mug half full and cold. Dylan sprawled on the couch, bare feet on my coffee table, crumbs scattered across the cushions. "Rachel," I began, my voice already tight, "where's your mother's ring?" She didn't look up. "What ring?" "The wedding ring. The gold one with the emerald." "Oh, that." Her tone was flat, careless. "I sold it." For a moment, I didn't understand what she'd said. The words hung in the air like smoke. "You sold it?" She finally turned toward me, spatula still in hand. "Yeah, we needed the money for our Miami trip. Flights aren't cheap, Dad." Connor didn't even look embarrassed. He chuckled and muttered, "It was just sitting there, waste of good gold." I gripped the edge of the counter. "That was your mother's ring, Rachel. The one she wore every day for 40 years. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Mom's gone. You keep acting like she's coming back. You don't even wear it. It's not doing anyone any good in a drawer." My chest tightened. "You had no right. That ring wasn't yours to sell." She sighed dramatically. "Then you should have kept it somewhere safe. Anyway, you can thank me later. The trip was good for Dylan. He's been stressed." "Stressed?" My voice cracked on the word. "He's 19 and hasn't worked a day in his life." Connor looked up then, annoyance creasing his forehead. "That's enough, old man. It's just a ring. Let it go." "Just a ring?" I whispered. Dylan laughed from the couch. "Grandpa's having a meltdown again." That laugh, sharp, disrespectful. It was the sound that finally broke something inside me, not in anger, but in clarity. I looked at each of them, really looked. Rachel's hard eyes, so unlike Margaret's gentle ones. Connor's smirk, the kind of man who measured life in dollars. Dylan's blank, careless face, shaped by indulgence and absence. I used to tell myself family was forgiveness, that Margaret would have wanted me to keep peace. But that morning, staring at them framed in my own kitchen, I realized forgiveness had turned into permission. Without another word, I walked back upstairs. The empty jewelry box sat on the dresser like a small grave. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding it in my lap. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence. My hands no longer shook. Margaret had always warned me softly about Rachel's spending habits, about Connor's charm that hid laziness. I'd dismissed her worries. "They're just young," I used to say. "They'll grow up." They hadn't. They'd only grown entitled. I closed the box and placed it carefully on the nightstand. My mind was steady now, frighteningly clear. I reached for my phone, opened the browser, and typed, "pawn shops near me." The first few listings didn't match, but I scrolled, taking notes, addresses, phone numbers, hours. I would find the ring. Margaret deserved that much. Downstairs, I could still hear Rachel's voice, casual and cutting. He'll calm down. He always does. No, I thought. Not this time. I tightened my grip on the phone. The sunlight from the window spilled across the empty velvet, and for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something unfamiliar stirring under the grief. Not anger, not sadness, something sharper. Resolve. I stood up, put on my jacket, and headed for the door. That was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, when everything began to change, when my late wife's quiet wisdom would return to protect me from the people who called themselves family, and when the truth, hidden inside her ring, would unravel every lie I had chosen to ignore. I spent the next hour calling every pawn shop in Savannah. My voice stayed calm, rehearsed, almost mechanical. A gold wedding ring with an emerald stone engraved with M and H inside. Most clerks sounded distracted, like they'd heard it all before. No, sir, nothing like that here. Could have been melted down already. Try the one on Abercorn Street. By the fifth call, my throat was dry, my patience frayed. The sixth shop didn't answer. On the seventh, a man's voice picked up on the second ring, steady and polite. Southern Star Pawn, this is Tony speaking. I repeated my description. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause that pulled my breath tight. Sir, he said finally, that ring sounds mighty familiar. Emerald in the center, gold band, engraving inside? Yes, I said, gripping the phone. That's it. Sold yesterday, maybe the day before. Another pause. Then, quietly, I remember it. The woman who brought it in looked to be in her 40s. Dark hair, seemed rushed. Said it was her mother's. I gave her $800 for it. That's her, I said. That's my daughter. Tony's tone softened. I figured it had a story. Most jewelry does. That's why I didn't resell it yet. I exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and shame. I need to buy it back. Please. I'll hold it for you, he said. But sir, there's something else. When I inspected the ring, I noticed a fine seam along the inner band. Thought it was just decorative at first, but it opened. There was a folded note inside. My pulse quickened. A note? Yes, sir. Handwritten. Looked old, but dry and well kept. I didn't read much of it, just a few words, numbers, and something like, when they betray you. I didn't feel right. Snooping. But I thought you should know. When they betray you. The phrase hit me like cold wind through glass. Margaret's voice seemed to echo behind it. She had always been careful, secretive in small ways that used to make me smile. She hid Christmas gifts in impossible places, labeled jars in code so no one could steal her homemade jams. But this was something else. I'll be there in half an hour, I said. Southern Star Pawn sat on a narrow side street between a tire shop and a shuttered diner. A dusty sign swung above the door. Inside, the air smelled of brass and polish, and faintly of rain on metal. A man stepped from behind the counter. Thin, early 60s, gray hair tied back neatly. You must be Mr. Whitman. I nodded. Tony? He smiled. That's me. I've got your ring right here. He opened a small safe behind the counter and took out a black velvet pouch. From it, he withdrew the ring and set it gently on the glass display case. Even under fluorescent lights, it gleamed. Margaret's ring, the gold warm, the emerald catching green light. I could see the faint engraving inside. M+H, 1973. My chest tightened. She must have loved you, Tony said quietly. Not many women these days wear a ring that long. She did, I whispered. He handed me a small envelope. The note was inside. I didn't touch it since. I looked down. My name was written on the paper in Margaret's familiar handwriting, looped letters, careful strokes. I reached for my wallet. How much do I owe you? I gave your daughter $800, Tony said. Fair price for the gold, though it's worth more. But it's not just gold anymore, is it? Tell you what, I'll sell it back for the true value, $1,200, and I'll throw in the story for free. I nodded. Deal. We completed the paperwork quietly. When it was done, Tony handed me the ring wrapped in soft cloth. "Take care of it," he said. "Things like that don't come twice." I thanked him and stepped out into the sunlight. Back in my truck, I sat for several minutes staring at the ring in my palm. The metal felt warm, like it had been waiting. My thumb brushed over the faint seam Tony had mentioned. I pressed gently. The inner band clicked open with a delicate snap. Inside, a paper curled tight as a seed. I used the tip of my pen to ease it out. The handwriting was unmistakable, Margaret's again. "For the time they betray you. Bank of Savannah. Safe deposit 9,216. My heart pounded. The words were deliberate, not poetic or sentimental. They were instructions. Margaret had prepared for this moment. For them. For me. I folded the note carefully and slid it back into the compartment, then shut the ring with a soft click. As I drove home, clouds rolled over the city, darkening the horizon. A thin drizzle streaked across the windshield. The ring rested on the seat beside me, its gold catching flashes of gray light. Rachel's voice echoed in my memory, her laughter when she told me she'd sold it. Connor's lazy smirk, Dylan's mocking tone. Margaret had seen this coming. She had known, even before her illness, even before death, that love could curdle inside greed. I reached the driveway just as thunder rolled in the distance. Through the window, I saw the silhouettes of my family inside, my daughter pacing, Connor on the couch, Dylan still glued to the television. They looked comfortable, secure. They had no idea that everything was about to change. I slipped the ring into my pocket, feeling its weight like a secret heartbeat. Tomorrow, I would go to the Bank of Savannah and open that box. Whatever Margaret left there, it wasn't money she wanted me to find. It was the truth. And maybe, just maybe, a way out. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, unable to sleep. The rain had passed, leaving Savannah washed clean and silver in the dawn light. I dressed carefully, pressed khakis, blue shirt, the one Margaret used to say brought out my eyes, and slipped her ring into my pocket. It felt heavier now, like it carried not just her memory but her message. The Bank of Savannah sat downtown near the riverfront, its limestone facade gleaming in the early sun. I parked at the curb and sat for a long moment, palms sweating against the steering wheel. The note burned in my mind. For the time they betray you. Those words had replayed through the night like a warning bell. Inside, the marble floors echoed beneath my shoes. A young woman behind the information desk smiled politely. Her name tag read Denise L. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Box number 9,216. Belonged to my late wife, Margaret Whitman." Her professional expression shifted slightly, curiosity softening into respect. "Do you have identification and her death certificate?" I handed her both. She typed quietly, the rhythmic clicks filling the silence. "Box 9,216, she said at last. "Last opened 6 years ago. Registered under Margaret Ann Whitman, secondary authorization listed as her spouse, Harold James Whitman. That's you." "Yes," I said softly. She looked up, smiling gently. "If you'd like, I can take you to our vault room. You can examine the contents privately." I nodded. We passed through a heavy steel door that sealed behind us with a soft hiss. The room beyond was cool, lined with countless drawers, each identical, anonymous. Denise located the box, slid a long metal key into one lock, gestured for me to do the same in the second. Together, we pulled out a slim metal container, heavier than I expected. She placed it on a table inside a small, private booth. "Take your time, Mr. Whitman," she said. "I'll be right outside." When the door closed, the silence pressed in around me. I sat down, staring at the box. My reflection shivered faintly in its brushed steel surface. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. What if it contained something painful? Proof of secrets, or debts, or betrayal of her own? Then I remembered her handwriting, that calm confidence that had anchored me for 45 years. Margaret wouldn't have hidden something cruel. She'd hidden something important. I lifted the lid. Inside lay neat envelopes stacked in 2 rows, bound with a ribbon. Beneath them, a folded piece of paper with my name written across it, Harold. My throat tightened. I removed the top envelope first. Inside were crisp bills, hundreds, fifties bundled with rubber bands. Another envelope beneath it held the same. My hands trembled as I counted quickly. 20,000, 30, 40. And then, the letter. Her handwriting covered both sides of the paper, elegant and unhurried. The smell of her old stationery, the faint trace of rosewater, rose from it, and my vision blurred before I even began to read. My dearest Harold, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have found what I left for you. I hope you found the note inside my ring. I knew someday you would need it. Please do not be angry that I kept this secret. For 30 years, I saved a small part of every paycheck from the hospital, tucked it away bit by bit. You always thought I volunteered for extra shifts, because I loved the work, and I did. But I also saw what was coming. Rachel worries me. I know you love her, but love has made you blind to her hunger for more. Connor feeds it, and Dylan learns it. I've seen the way they look at your house, your savings, your peace. I tried to talk to you once after Rachel's wedding, do you remember? You laughed and said she'd outgrow it. I knew she wouldn't. This money is for you, not them. If they ever betray you, and they will, this will give you freedom. Do not feel guilty. You gave them everything that mattered. They chose greed over gratitude. Promise me something, Harold. Don't let them turn you into a frightened old man begging for space in your own home. You built that home. You built our life. They don't get to own that. If you're still wearing my ring, smile for me. That means I did something right. Forever yours, Margaret. I sat back, the paper trembling in my hands. My chest ached so deeply it felt hollow. She had known. All those years ago, before her illness, before the silence that followed her passing, she had seen what I refused to. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice again, that soft hum she used to make while cooking, the gentle clinking of her bracelets, the warmth that filled every room she touched. Then I saw Rachel's face from yesterday, cold, unapologetic, chewing pancakes while telling me she'd sold her mother's ring, Connor's lazy smirk, Dylan's laughter. Margaret had predicted it perfectly. The vault light flickered faintly overhead. I wiped my eyes, folded the letter carefully, and placed it inside my breast pocket. Then I counted again, $40,000, tucked neatly into those envelopes. Not just money. A message. A shield. I closed the lid, carried the box back to the door, and handed it to Denise. All done, sir? She asked gently. Yes, I said. Thank you. She nodded, eyes kind. Take care, Mr. Whitman. Outside, the morning had turned golden, the city stirring with life. I walked slowly toward my truck, each step heavier with realization. Margaret had planned for everything, for my weakness, for Rachel's ambition, for the day love would have to harden into self-defense. In my pocket, the ring pressed against the letter like two halves of one truth. As I drove home along the oak-lined streets, I realized something I hadn't let myself think until now. Margaret hadn't just left me protection, she had left me instructions. And if my daughter thought she'd stolen from an old man, she was about to learn how wrong she was. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the house looked exactly as it always did. Sunlight spilling across the porch, wind chimes moving faintly in the breeze, but I no longer saw home. I saw evidence. Every footprint, every stain on the rug, every unpaid bill scattered on the kitchen counter now carried weight. Margaret's letter had shifted something in me. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing. The moment I stepped inside, Rachel's voice hit me like static. You've been out all morning, Dad. I needed the car. I ignored her, walking straight to my study. I could feel her eyes follow me, suspicious, irritated that I hadn't responded. I shut the door quietly behind me, locked it, and sat at my desk. Margaret's letter lay in front of me, folded neatly beside her ring. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Documentation, Whitman Residence. Then I opened the Notepad app and typed the first line. Step 1. Record everything. That night, after the house had gone still, I began my first inspection. The living room looked more like a motel lobby than a home. Connor's work boots sat by the door muddy, untouched for weeks. He hadn't worked since he left his project management job, which was another way of saying he'd been fired. Beer cans lined the coffee table, 2 remote controls buried under crumbs and magazines. I took photographs of everything. Each click of the camera was methodical, deliberate, almost soothing. In the kitchen, I photographed the grocery receipts from 3 days ago, $186.42, all paid with my card. The fridge was full of food I didn't eat, wine I didn't drink, leftovers I hadn't touched. I snapped photos of the electric bill, gas bill, and water statement, each addressed to me, each overdue, none ever repaid. The guest room, Margaret's old sewing room, had become Rachel's makeshift walk-in closet. Her dresses hung from hooks on the curtain rod. Piles of shoes filled plastic bins where Margaret's fabric used to be. I photographed every angle. In Dylan's room, the smell hit me first: sweat, cheap cologne, and apathy. Clothes littered the floor, video game controllers tangled in cords, and an empty pizza box sat atop a stack of unopened mail. My mail. I took more pictures. By the time I returned to my study, it was past midnight. I uploaded all the images, organized them by room, labeled every file by date and subject. It felt like building a case not against strangers, but against the people who shared my blood. The next morning, while they slept, I installed the first camera. It looked like a smoke detector, small and discreet, mounted high in the corner of the living room. Another went in the hallway facing the bedrooms, and a third in the kitchen, disguised as an air freshener. I'd checked Georgia's surveillance laws the night before. One-party consent, perfectly legal. That afternoon, I watched the live feed on my phone from the privacy of my locked study. Rachel sat at the table scrolling through her tablet. Connor lounged on the couch, flipping through TV channels. Their conversation unfolded like a confession. "He's getting worse," Rachel said. "I think he's losing it." Connor smirked. "Good. Makes it easier. Once he forgets where his wallet is, we can talk to a lawyer about power of attorney." Rachel laughed a short, ugly sound. "You think we could get the house before then?" Connor shrugged. "Probably. He's 70. What's he gonna do? Call the cops on his own daughter?" Dylan's voice drifted in from somewhere off-screen. "You guys fighting again? Grandpa's weird, but he's harmless." "He's in the way," Rachel said flatly. I paused the feed, my hands trembling but steadying quickly. I replayed it twice, burned the video to an external drive, labeled the file, Conversation June 5th. That night, I wrote my second note under Step 2. Step 2. Create a paper trail. Always assume they will lie. Over the next week, I kept at it. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every unexplained charge. Connor had been using my debit card to pay for his gym membership. Rachel had transferred money to her account through my joint card, claiming it was for groceries. Dylan had charged $142 on an online gaming site. I highlighted each line in my statement and printed copies. When I wasn't documenting, I pretended not to notice. I ate dinner with them in silence, nodding at their empty conversation, waiting. Let them believe I was the same tired man they'd always underestimated. One evening, the camera caught something new. Rachel sat on the couch with a notepad. "We need him to trust us for a few more weeks," she whispered to Connor. "Then we can get him to sign over the deed. Just say it's for insurance paperwork." Connor leaned closer, his voice low. "If he refuses?" Rachel smiled, cold and deliberate. "Then we'll make him think he already did." I stopped the recording, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the screen. There it was, the confirmation of every fear Margaret had written about. By the end of that week, my folders were full. Photographs, bills, recordings, transcripts, timestamps. All organized, indexed, and duplicated on 2 flash drives. The evidence wasn't just for the courts. It was for me to see, in black and white, what love had blinded me to for years. That night, I placed the drives in Margaret's old jewelry box, beside her ring and the folded letter. The weight of it felt balanced, purposeful. Outside, thunder rolled over the marshlands, low and distant. I stood by the window, watching lightning flicker across the horizon. For a brief second, the house flashed bright, every shadow revealed. That was what I was doing, now illuminating every corner they thought was theirs to exploit. In the faint reflection on the glass, I saw Margaret's photograph on the mantel behind me, her gentle smile frozen in time. "I'm doing what you asked," I whispered. "I'm being strong." The first drops of rain tapped against the window pane. I closed the curtains, shut the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I'd start step 3. Find an attorney. And when the truth finally came to light, it wouldn't be my voice, they'd have to believe it would be hers. I woke the next morning with a strange calmness in my chest. Not peace exactly, something colder, sharper, determination. By now, I had every piece of evidence I needed. The hidden videos, the receipts, the bank statements, even their voices plotting against me. But evidence meant nothing if it just sat in a folder. It was time to move. I searched online for elder law attorneys near Savannah. Names and numbers filled the screen, but one stood out: Lydia Barnett, attorney at law, protecting seniors' rights since 2002. Her reviews mentioned patience, sharp instincts, and one phrase that sealed my decision: she doesn't back down. I called her office that afternoon. A calm receptionist answered, and within minutes, I had an appointment for Wednesday morning. When I arrived, the downtown office was quiet, sunlight slanting through tall windows that overlooked the river. The waiting area smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. I sat holding my folder so tightly my knuckles went white. "Mr. Whitman?" Lydia appeared in the doorway. She was in her late 40s, hair pulled into a neat bun, eyes intelligent and unreadable. Her voice was low, steady, the kind of tone that made you believe she'd already solved harder cases. We shook hands. "Come in," she said. "Tell me what's going on." Her office was neat but lived in. Stacks of legal binders, a framed degree from Emory, and a small plant wilting on the windowsill. I sat across from her desk, placed the thick folder between us, and began. "My daughter, her husband, and their son have lived in my house for 2 years. They don't pay rent, and lately, they've been trying to take everything I own." She opened the folder and started scanning documents as I spoke methodically, quickly. "I have recordings, statements, proof of unauthorized transactions. My wife Margaret left me money secretly. She must have known this would happen." Lydia nodded without interrupting, flipping through photographs of the house, the grocery receipts, the bank withdrawals. She stopped when she reached the transcript of Rachel and Connor's conversation. She said, "Then we'll make him think he already signed." Lydia read the line aloud slowly, her voice flat. "That's attempted fraud, possibly coercion. Very good documentation, Mr. Whitman." "Thank you," I said. I wasn't sure how to start. "You started perfectly," she replied. "This is more than most clients bring me in a month." She took out a legal pad and began to write. "First step, we establish a rental agreement. You are the owner, and they are tenants at will. Once rent is demanded, their refusal becomes legal grounds for eviction." Eviction? The word tasted heavy in my mouth. "Yes, but we'll do it cleanly, legally, and with a paper trail so tight they won't be able to wriggle through a single gap." I nodded. "What about the money they took?" "Financial exploitation," she said. "We'll add that to the record. The videos prove intent, which strengthens your case. But one thing at a time. Once we serve the rental agreement, their reaction will tell us everything we need to know." She slid the folder aside and looked at me directly. "I'll need a retainer $3,000 to start. That covers drafting, filing, and, if necessary, the first court hearing." I didn't hesitate. "I'll bring it tomorrow." When I stood to leave, Lydia rose too. "Mr. Whitman," she said softly, "I know it's painful, but you're doing the right thing. Family or not, they're exploiting you. You're not alone anymore." For the first time in months, my chest eased. "Thank you," I said quietly. That night, I slept deeply. 2 days later, Lydia emailed me the draft rental agreement. It was professional, exacting 3 pages long, every clause backed by state statute. Rent, $1,400 per month, due on the 1st. Tenant responsibilities, pay 50% of utilities, maintain property condition, exhibit respectful conduct toward the homeowner. It even included a 30-day notice clause for eviction in case of non-compliance. Lydia had thought of everything. When I read it, I felt a strange satisfaction. After years of feeling like a guest in my own home, I was reclaiming it line by line. Lydia arranged for a notary to serve the documents. On Monday afternoon, a woman named Janine arrived, wearing a blazer and a calm, businesslike expression. She carried a leather portfolio and a clipboard. Rachel was in the kitchen when I opened the door. "Who's that?" she asked sharply. "I'm here to deliver documents for Miss Rachel Connor," Janine said, polite but firm. Rachel frowned but took them. Her eyes darted across the first page. Then the blood drained from her face. "What is this? Rent? Utilities? Are you insane?" "It's a formal rental agreement," I said evenly. "Effective immediately." "You can't be serious," she shouted. "We're family." Janine made a note on her clipboard. "Delivery confirmed," she said calmly, and walked out, closing the door behind her. Rachel whirled on me, shaking the papers in the air. "You can't charge your own daughter rent." "You've lived here rent-free for 2 years," I said. "That ends now." Connor stormed in from the living room. "What's going on?" "Your father-in-law's lost his damn mind," Rachel snapped. "He's serving us a lease." Connor grabbed the papers, scanned them, and gave a short, derisive laugh. "You're not thinking clearly, old man. Maybe it's time someone got you evaluated." I met his stare. "My mind is fine, but your time here isn't." He smirked, stepping closer. "You're really going to start a war with your own family?" I didn't flinch. "You started it the day you sold Margaret's ring." For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then Rachel's voice broke it. "You'll regret this. Mom would have been ashamed of you." "Mom," I said softly, "would have done exactly what I'm doing." I turned and walked to my study. Behind me, I could hear the low, furious whispering of 2 people realizing they were no longer in control. Later that night, Lydia called. How did they take it? Like thieves caught in the act. "Good," she said. "Expect them to escalate. That's what people do when they're losing. Keep documenting everything. I'll start drafting the next phase, formal eviction papers." Her voice carried a calm certainty that steadied me. "And Mr. Whitman," she added before hanging up, "you might not see it yet, but you've already won the first battle." I hung up and sat in the quiet study, Margaret's letter lying open beside me, the glow from the desk lamp catching the words, "Be strong. Live for yourself." For the first time, I truly understood what she'd meant. They thought they'd cornered an old man, but they'd forgotten an architect knows how to build things and how to tear them down. For the first few days after the rental papers were served, the house went eerily quiet. No shouting, no laughter, not even Dylan's video games, just the heavy silence of resentment. But it wasn't peace, it was pressure building before a storm. They stopped talking to me completely. Rachel made separate grocery runs and locked her food in the pantry. Connor stopped pretending to look for work, and Dylan barely left his room except to slam doors. I kept my routine unchanged: coffee at 6, walk at 7, paperwork at 8. Routine gave me calm, and calm was armor. The first crack came on a Friday night. I was in the kitchen making tea when Connor appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the frame with his arms crossed, watching me. The expression on his face wasn't anger, it was something worse. Calculation. "You think you can just push us out?" he said finally. "I'm following the law," I replied. He smirked. "You call it law. I call it dementia." I turned slowly. "Say that again." He stepped forward until he was only a foot away. "You're 71. You forget things. You're paranoid. That's what Rachel says. Maybe we should get the court to confirm it." I took a deep breath. "You want a competency hearing? Fine. But be careful, Connor. You might learn which of us actually understands how the law works. His eyes narrowed. You think some lawyer can save you? She already has, I said quietly. He moved closer, too close. I tried to step around him, but his arm shot out and pushed me back, not hard enough to bruise, but enough to make his point. Careful, he said, smiling faintly. Accidents happen at your age. The tea kettle whistled sharply behind me. I shut it off, turned back, and met his eyes without fear. You just made your biggest one. He scoffed, turned, and walked away. What he didn't know was that the new smoke detector above the kitchen doorway had recorded everything, his posture, his shove, his words, every second of it. I sat down at my desk and uploaded the footage immediately. Then I emailed it to Lydia. Within 10 minutes, she called. Mr. Whitman, that's assault. Even a light shove qualifies. Combined with the bank attempt and financial records you sent me, we're past eviction. I'm filing for emergency protective eviction based on elder abuse and domestic intimidation. How soon? I asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less if the judge reviews it quickly. The next morning, I found my mail open on the kitchen counter. 3 envelopes sliced neatly, all addressed to me. One was from Lydia's office, another from the power company, the third from my bank. Rachel was pouring coffee at the sink. She didn't even turn around when I said, You went through my mail. Don't accuse me of things, Dad. Maybe you opened them and forgot. I took a photo of the envelopes right there. Time-stamped. Federal crime, I said softly. You should be more careful. She froze, then turned, her face hard. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making us miserable? You did that yourselves. That night, I could hear them arguing behind closed doors. Rachel's muffled sobs, Connor's harsh voice, Dylan's door slamming. I spent those hours in my study, compiling everything: videos, receipts, transcripts, photos. The files filled 2 flash drives labeled Evidence Set A and Set B. I stored one in my desk, one in the glove compartment of my truck. Margaret would have been proud of the precision. By the following Thursday, Lydia called with a tone that carried satisfaction. Hearing scheduled for July 9th, Savannah County Courthouse, Room 204. The judge has already reviewed the preliminary evidence. He's not impressed with your daughter. Neither am I said. The morning of the hearing, I wore my Navy suit, the same one from Margaret's funeral. As I stood in the courthouse hallway, my hands resting on the cane I didn't really need, I saw Rachel at the far end of the corridor. She was dressed sharply, hair perfect, face composed in that brittle way people wear when they know they're losing. Connor sat beside her, pretending confidence. Dylan scrolled through his phone, oblivious. Lydia stood next to me, her folders stacked neatly in her arms. Don't speak unless I cue you, she whispered. The evidence will speak for itself. The bailiff opened the door. Case 2198, Whitman versus Thompson. Inside, the courtroom was small but bright, sunlight spilling through tall windows. Judge Michael Boone sat at the bench, silver hair, sharp eyes, the kind of man who didn't like having his time wasted. Lydia opened first. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Harold Whitman, is the sole legal owner of his residence. The respondents, his daughter Rachel Thompson, her husband Connor, and their son, have lived rent-free for over 2 years. They've refused to comply with a lawful rental agreement and engaged in documented acts of financial exploitation and physical intimidation. She pressed play on the monitor. Connor's shove filled the screen. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening. Then came Rachel's recorded voice from the living room. We'll make him think he already signed the deed. Even Dylan looked up from his phone. Lydia continued. Additionally, Mr. Whitman's bank confirmed multiple attempts by Mrs. Thompson to access his accounts under false claims of power of attorney. Rachel's attorney, a pale man in an ill-fitting suit, rose weakly. Your Honor, these are family misunderstandings. My client was... The judge cut him off. Assault is not a misunderstanding. Mail tampering and financial fraud are not misunderstandings. He turned toward Rachel. Mrs. Thompson, do you deny selling your late mother's ring? Rachel swallowed. I needed the money. It was mine too. It wasn't, the judge said flatly. And you sold property without consent. That establishes a pattern. He turned to me. Mr. Whitman, do you wish them to vacate the property? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. They've turned my home into a prison. The judge signed the papers right there. Effective immediately. The court orders the respondents to vacate the premises within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal by sheriff's deputies. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting physical contact or intimidation. Rachel gasped. Connor muttered a curse. Dylan just stared, face pale. Lydia nodded once, her expression unreadable but satisfied. Outside the courtroom, Rachel rushed after me. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Dad, please, she said, voice trembling. We can fix this. We'll pay the rent. Don't do this. I stopped, looked at her, really looked. You had years to fix this. You chose not to. Her tears vanished as quickly as they came. Her jaw tightened. Mom would hate you for this. I shook my head. No, Mom's the one who saved me from you. Her mouth fell open, but I didn't wait for a response. Lydia's voice behind me broke the silence. Let's go, Mr. Whitman. You've got your freedom now. We walked out into the bright Savannah sun. I could feel Margaret beside me somehow, quiet but certain. The war wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. The house felt strange after they left. Too big, too quiet, but not lonely, more like it was breathing again after being held hostage. The sheriff's deputies had come that morning to supervise the move-out. Rachel had shouted, Connor had cursed, Dylan had thrown his video game console into a trash bag. I didn't say a word. I just stood by the window and watched as the life they'd drained from this place finally spilled out onto the driveway. When the last box was gone, I walked through each room slowly. The silence was almost holy. Dust hung in beams of sunlight, like tiny ghosts. In the kitchen, the counters were bare, except for a note they'd left behind. Hope you're happy. Old man. I folded it once and dropped it into the trash. That afternoon, Lydia called. Congratulations, she said. The court order stands uncontested. They've signed acknowledgement of eviction. You're officially free. Free, I repeated softly, testing the word like something I hadn't spoken in years. But even as I said it, a strange unease lingered, like something unfinished, something waiting. 2 days later, I found out what it was. I was in the bedroom cleaning out Margaret's old sewing cabinet when I came across a small cedar box I'd never noticed before. It was tucked beneath a pile of folded linen, sealed with a brass latch. For a moment, I thought it might just be old thread or buttons. But the weight of it was wrong, too heavy. I carried it to the bed, sat down, and opened the latch. Inside lay the cherrywood jewelry box, the same one where her ring had been. I lifted it out, surprised. I thought I'd already placed it in the safe. When I turned it over in my hands, something faintly clicked inside. I froze. There was a hidden compartment beneath the velvet lining, almost invisible unless you pressed in a very specific spot. Margaret's doing, no doubt. I worked my thumbnail under the seam, and with a soft snap, a thin wooden panel lifted free. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front, in her graceful handwriting, but this time, the ink was darker, more deliberate, and beneath my name, 2 words, Final Instructions. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter and a notarized document. My dearest Harold, if you've found this, it means the first part of my plan worked. I know you stubborn, loyal, and endlessly forgiving. You always believed people could change, even when they proved they wouldn't. That's why I couldn't tell you about this. You think I saved that money for emergencies. I did. But this is the rest of the story. The Savannah house is not yours to carry alone. You built it, yes, but I knew what it had come to represent. Their entitlement, your guilt, our silence. I wanted it to mean something better after we were gone. 10 years ago, I drafted an alternate will. It leaves the house not to Rachel, not to Dylan, not even to you, but to the Hope Garden Foundation, the children's medical charity, where I volunteered. They were building a home for sick kids and their families, and I wanted our home to become theirs when you were ready to let go. Don't be angry, my love. This isn't punishment. It's purpose. You've carried the weight of our family long enough. Now it's time to give that weight to someone who will use it to heal. When you're ready, take this will to your lawyer. She'll know what to do. And Harold, if Rachel ever calls you again, forgive her, but don't let her back in. Love her from a distance. That's the kind of love she understands. Be free. Be yourself again. And remember, I never left you. I just stepped into another room. Forever yours, Margaret. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For a long while, I couldn't move. It felt as though Margaret herself had walked back into the room, calm and sure as ever, still guiding me from beyond. When I finally looked at the document, I saw the seal, State of Georgia, Notary Public, 2015. The will was legally binding, properly witnessed, perfectly valid. Margaret had thought of everything. I drove straight to Lydia's office. She read the letter twice before looking up, eyes wide. Mr. Whitman, this is extraordinary. It supersedes any previous estate documents. It's airtight. So the house will legally belong to the Hope Garden Foundation upon transfer. You can live here as long as you want, but after that, the property becomes theirs. I exhaled slowly. That's exactly what she'd want. Lydia smiled faintly. It's poetic justice, in a way. Your family tried to steal the house for greed. Now it'll belong to children who need hope. I nodded. Let's make it official. 2 weeks later, we filed the paperwork. The foundation director, a kind man named Dr. Bennett, came to meet me. He toured the home quietly, his eyes tracing the walls, the porch, the garden. It's beautiful, he said softly, and it'll mean the world to the families we help. I shook his hand. Just promise me you'll fill it with laughter again. He smiled. That's a promise. That evening, I sat in the empty living room as the sun dipped low over the marshes. The air smelled of rain and sawdust. On the mantel sat Margaret's framed photo, watching me with that same gentle smile. The phone rang once, Rachel's number flashing across the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I answered. Her voice was trembling. Dad, I heard you sold the house. Please tell me it's not true. It's true, I said. It's going to a charity, kids who need a home more than we ever did. You can't do that. That's my inheritance. No, I said quietly. It was never yours. You just thought it would be. She started to cry, angry, desperate. You'll die alone, Dad. I already did, I replied. The day your mother died. I hung up before she could answer. Outside, the crickets began their evening chorus. I turned off the lights and sat for a while in the dark, listening. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again. But this time, it didn't sound like warning, it sounded like release. The next morning, I packed a few boxes. Margaret's letters, her ring, her favorite book of poems. The rest, I left behind. As I locked the front door for the last time, I whispered, It's yours now, love. You built something bigger than both of us. The wind carried the scent of lilies from the garden she planted 20 years ago. Still blooming, still alive. And as I walked down the steps, I realized what she'd really left me wasn't money or property, it was freedom. Freedom from guilt, freedom from control, freedom to begin again. I left Savannah on a golden morning in early autumn. The moving truck held only what truly mattered, Margaret's letters, her ring, a few clothes, and my old drafting tools. Everything else I let go. It was strange how light life could feel once you stopped trying to carry what wasn't yours anymore. My new home sat by a quiet lake, outside Dahlonega, Georgia, surrounded by pine trees that whispered when the wind passed through. The cabin wasn't large, but it felt honest. I built a small porch swing overlooking the water, and spent my mornings there with coffee and silence, the kind of silence that heals instead of haunts. The Hope Garden Foundation sent me an update 3 months later. They had finished converting the Savannah house into a recovery lodge for children and their families. The photo attached showed bright paint, open windows, and a garden blooming again where weeds had once choked the soil. The sign above the entrance read, "The Margaret and Harold Whitman Center for Hope." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I traced her name with my finger on the printed photo, tears warming my cheeks. She had done it, turned our pain into something that would live long after both of us were gone. Every so often, Rachel still called. Sometimes she cursed. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she tried to sound kind. I no longer felt anger when I heard her voice, just distance. A gentle ache where love used to live. I never hung up cruelly. I just said, "Take care of yourself," and ended the call. Margaret had been right. Love didn't always mean letting people back in. Sometimes it meant standing far enough away so they couldn't hurt you again. The days began to settle into a quiet rhythm. I repaired furniture for neighbors, tended the small garden by the porch, even joined the local library club on Thursdays. At night, I'd sit by the lake, with Margaret's ring in my palm, the water reflecting the sunset in soft gold ripples. One evening, a letter arrived from Dr. Bennett. Inside was a photo of the first family to stay at the center, a young mother holding a little boy with a shaved head. On the back, he'd written, "He calls it the Miracle House." I smiled through tears. Somewhere deep inside, I heard Margaret's laughter, light and sure. Looking out across the lake, I realized something simple yet profound. She had been preparing me for this all along. Her love wasn't about holding on. It was about teaching me how to let go without losing myself. I took a sip of coffee, the evening air cool and bright around me, and whispered into the wind, "You were right, love. You always were." Life lesson. When people you love betray you, it's easy to think revenge or bitterness will fill the wound, but true strength lies in calm defiance, reclaiming your dignity, your peace, and your purpose. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It blooms quietly, just like lilies in a garden you once thought was gone.